I think now we're going to convene the four speakers in front of you on sort of these two tables and start with a questions and discussion. See, I must admit, times have changed. You see, when I started in publishing, the only partner you needed definitely was the post office to distribute the journal. And if you didn't own your own printing plant, which Elsevier did and Cambridge University did, University of Chicago did, American Medical Association even owned their own printing plant. I guess you needed a printer. But anyway, here we are. You see, now we need partners. I guess just about every publisher, every society has partners as far as that goes. So we have heard four speakers. Dan has talked about how they have sort of addressed the changing needs with the technology and basically have managed to keep the control of the various publishing processes and publishing businesses, and talked about the vertical integration that is there as they have done that. And then we heard Charlene, as they have kept the publishing process pretty much in-house, but they have selectively partnered for the various services which AACR ends up managing the various vendors who provide those services. And then, of course, we have a university press, which is, I think, sometimes, and you'll have to pardon me, Aaron, I think of Oxford University Press and Cambridge University Press more than a university press, because they are larger than Oxford University Press, definitely is larger than many of the commercial publishers as far as that goes. And then, of course, we have a commercial publisher, Elsevier, and of course they both have made a rather compelling case why a society may wish to partner with a publisher, if not completely, for the various services that the technology and the globalization demand anymore from the publishing process. So that said, who's going to start the process of raising some questions for this great panel we have? Okay. It's perfectly okay to ask questions amongst each other too. Okay, all right, get here.
It's actually my first SSPBD, so it's a new member of the question. I was wondering, from your experience, either as a society of your own or as a partner of the society, is there any underlying, preference from those audience for open access or against, and then how that attitude may impact on, the various, innovation and technology.
Yeah.
Well, in the physics field, there's a very strong a bias toward open access, but a very specific type. The free sort of green open access, so that's the repositories or e-print servers like the archive, et cetera, are very popular within the subcultures and is really expanding through physics. At least from our point of view, from our journals, the actual gold open access or pay open access from the author's end is very minimal. When we discount submissions or publications with our purely gold open access journals, we have less than a 1% buy-in overall for all our other articles in the hybrid mode. And so what we try to do, and we have been doing for a long time, is we try to coordinate efforts to make it easier, both in copyright transfer and other issues, to make it easier for the author to be able to post a version of their articles themselves. And so from our point of view, we actually allow them to post our version, the article of record, on their own institutional sites.
So they can deposit, because I'm from the biology field, so
Yes.
that's something we're stuck to wrestling.
Right.
If I just jump in here, I think what you're looking for some context of open access and how it's being greeted, subject specific. So if we can just talk in general, I think the hard thing about stereotypes is that racism gave them a bad name. So let's just accept that stereotypes are okay for a few minutes. Physicists tend to be a little more pocket protector oriented. They have their favorites. They like arXiv. arXiv is ARBigXiv. It's based at Cornell University Library, and basically it's a green. And by green, it means the author version of record. And they want to be able to deposit their manuscripts in that archive. And they largely do so because it's part of the cultural influence for that subject. Now, you're in biology. Now, I would argue that open access really birthed out of biomedicine in particular. Not life sciences, not ecological, not the Society for Penguins, but I would say genetics, things which are FDA clinical stage 2 and going quickly to clinical 2, or certainly public health. That said, that's some of the biggest appetite that we're seeing, at least Cambridge is seeing, for open access, whether it's Gold OA. I cited the Journal of Nutritional Science from the Nutrition Science Society, based out of the UK. And that largely, their demand came from their membership wanting a gold. They had a hybrid option. They wanted a gold OA journal because nutrition feeds into public health and by extension epidemiology and a growing world population. And then by extension of that, human genetics, molecular genetics, anything that pretty much is fast-tracked to the human condition. Not seeing a huge appetite in the life sciences, and by life I mean non-human, non-lab bench, like ecological sciences. There's tacit respect for the mandates that are being sent down. People want to play ball with it, but they're not necessarily clamoring for an open access journal. You're certainly not seeing it in earth sciences. Not seeing it. I'm seeing it pretty much biomedical. I would say 70% of the demand is coming from biomedical research.
Well, I think it ties back to grant funding. I mean, those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it ties back in a lot of ways to grant funding. Those disciplines where there's a lot of grant funding that goes into the research for publication, they understand the mandates. They understand the different entities that have pushed for gold open access. Well, initially green, and since both green and gold open access. And I think they're more willing to push publishers, to push journals, to move in that direction. Within my portfolio, we have orthopedics, biomechanics, and rheumatology, so we sort of move up the spectrum a little bit. In biomechanics, we're seeing a large increase in hybrid open access. Authors that are coming back to certain institutions saying, sorry, I have to do this. In rheumatology, some, and in orthopedics, there's very little grant funding, so very little appetite.
Yep.
Part of, I'm just wondering if your model has changed a bit. Open access is obviously having author's choice is one side of the equation, but there is a push now, especially coming from the United Kingdom, to publish under the CCPY license.
That's right.
Which far extends open access to basically giving the rights to content. So how do you see that impacting your business model?
Right, and there are variations of the CCPY, the CCP.
Yes, but the only one they will accept is CCP.
And for those authors that are affiliated with institutions that require the CCPY, I don't have the numbers and the percentage off the top of my head, but the majority of Elsevier journals in the sort of biological sciences have accepted that they need to allow the CCPY.
Just
Again, just quickly, in many cases, we don't have the choice. If the societies are making that choice on their own, we can advise them either for or against. But completely discipline specific.
it's true.
If there's-
What Jason's saying is absolutely, again, back to this subject specificity. Even the suggestion of mandates coming down, if we use as a case example, the United States Fed, any any federal agency that has over $100 million annually in grants has to come up with a version of open access that can be anywhere, operative phrase here, anywhere, 6 months to 2 years, depending on the medium. So biomedical research, I'm betting 6 months. I will bet green money that the social sciences will be about 2 years because there's not a huge demand for it. The funding isn't there in the first part, and the end result is going to be is that After 2 years, there are models where you could have a subscription-oriented portfolio in social sciences and then allow free accessibility, operative word being free accessibility, underneath an open access mandate after 2 years. In fact, it's got me interested because you're publishing the American Journal of Human Genetics. Right. So if memory serves, this is another tender I didn't win. They had an embargo period of 6 months or 12 months for free access.
6 months.
I forget. I'm confusing. Is that
6
still in
months.
place?
It was 6 months when they were with the Chicago Press. It was a debate when they transitioned, and the decision was left up to the American Society of Human Genetics in 6 months.
Right. The point being of that is that 6 months freely accessible, not open access, and those concepts are often confused. The point being is that there is a buy-in from the biomedical research community to allow access to their research. And that sort of underpins open access. But what it points back to is the adaptability of the subscription model, because many societies rely upon their publications to support their endeavors, to coexist with an open access movement. So it's a complicated way of saying it's not going to change overnight. What the federal government in the United States, as well as the UK, as well as the EU to an extent, are helping catalyze change of publishing that doesn't implode an industry.
Yes?
If you were to start a green open access term, do you then, and you have a 1-year embargo period, does that mean that every paper necessarily becomes free, or just those authors that have that requirement?
Well,
Or is it just
there was an earlier talk today about open access publishing. And so one of the challenges of open access is the definition of terms versus what's meant versus what's understood. So green open access and gold open access, green, Romeo Sherpa, is typically the author version of record. Being able to put that either on their institutional repository or their departmental homepages. So when you talk about creating a green open access journal, many journals already that way are green for the author version of record on acceptance. So you could have it be accessible after a year. You said freely. I think you mean it converts to gold after 12 months?
I guess that was my interpretation of the embargo period.
It is. It can be. And the challenge that publishers are having right now is that the Fed, particularly the United States, Fed hasn't been very clear. In fact, we've been waiting for these. I think it was supposed to happen in October, and it didn't. February of 2013, Office of Science, Technology, and Policy Division, offshoot of the White House Administration for Science. I forget. National Science Advisor? No. The point being, OSTP said in February 2013 that all these agencies, I think there's principally 3 or 4, had to come up with recommendations to be submitted to that office by the end of August, with a suggestion that sometime around the fall, October, there would be an announcement. We're still waiting. So it's not very clear. If it's not clear to you, it's certainly not clear to publishers. But irrespective if you're Elsevier Cell, AACR, Cambridge University Press, or APS, there's publishers have been experimenting with different tools within open access. So in case there is this dramatic change in the industry, we have different options in place that still allow the continuity of publishing.
I
Other-
can say that recently there was an internal memo sent around that or a presentation sent around that confirmed in those cases where you have gold open access because of grant funding, we as the publisher end up actually going through the process of deposit for those authors
Right.
rather than 85% of the time. As opposed to, you make it easy for the author to do it upon publication, but in many cases we get chased down either by the author's institution or by PubMed to deposit the content. And so in many cases we're actually having to follow up and go through the process that the author was supposed to go through.
Yeah, actually, this morning, as Jason was saying, there was a talk on open access and mandates, actually. And one of the issues probably started off with like the MIT and Harvard faculty votes for self-archiving or institutional archiving. However, they had put caveats in there that if an author either had to, was publishing in a journal that did not allow it or wanted a
All these
waiver,
waivers.
they could just write to their dean and the dean would grant them a waiver. Well, what the APS did to try to simplify the process is we actually went to Harvard and MIT. We generated agreements with them and signed a single licensing agreement that then essentially made Harvard and MIT, for their authors, pretty much authors of the paper in the sense that the authors could transfer copyright to us, but we would then relicense back a certain amount of rights back, which includes the ability for them to institutionally archive the version, including our version of record. And so what we did is we then spared the authors by having a universal coverage license with the institution. So no author had to even think about having to go to their dean for a waiver or anything else.
And what did Dean get you for Christmas?
They always-
Nothing.
they're always at the
He's probably like, thank
They always get- that's
Oh, yeah. It's just, it's almost as if they just want a slight barrier because you have to do something. It's not that they won't grant a waiver, but they just sort of made it so that since you have to opt out, hopefully you won't, and then deposit.
There is in the case of physics because you're pretty much open access, so there is not that time difference when they can deposit, right? Maybe
Right.
For biology, that might come into as an issue, right? I don't know.
Again, it goes back to the commercial viability of the content. I mean, that always plays the biggest role in what's the potential loss for
Right.
us depositing this somewhere and making it available to anyone who wants it.
Yes.
So is it universally understood that the corresponding author is his institution rules? Because there are plenty of papers that have 50 authors coming from all, the whole idea is to encourage collaboration from other groups. So now you have the fifth authors at MIT, but the corresponding author is
Typically, the corresponding, so universally accepted, I would say no. However, garden variety, typically the corresponding author will sign the submission agreement, which could be copyright transfer, could be open access, whatever that publisher offers, on behalf of all the other co-authors.
Yeah. Actually, what we've started doing now is we're starting to collect more and more information about all the authors, including the co-authors. Hopefully, we'll start integrating ORCID, which is the researcher IDs, to make it simpler. But what we do now is we cluster the authors and request that different authoring groups sign the particular transfer. So if they're a university professor, they sign a transfer copyright agreement. However, if they're from, say, a UK government institution, they'll sign a UK Crown copyright with us on behalf of all the authors in that category. And so we tend to break up the larger collaborative groups into clusters of types of authoring individuals and have them sign the proper transfer amongst those groups if they're able.
And the orthopedics community in particular actually has been out front on this, mostly because of the Department of Justice sort of involvement with the industry back in 2009 and the Sunshine Act. Most of the specialty societies that are affiliated with the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons now require signed author agreements from every author on
That's also true of all of our papers, all the authors have to sign
This is both copyright and disclosure.
and
Right.
disclosure as well.
Yeah, we do this. Out of curiosity, is that physically signed, or does that just mean they indicate that, say, within the article submission process?
Yeah, they can e-sign.
Okay.
All right. Other questions?
I just want to comment, there was a question that was posed to Jason, and I'm not sure if the woman's still here, talking about alternate languages.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really interesting point, because something that all of us have been speaking about, technology is driving the industry forward in the first part. The second part is discoverability or visibility or global reach. I think what we're going to see more and more of are concurrent language publications, at least certainly in the abstract, to help foster that discoverability. So, using as a case example, we co-publish because we publish a lot of Canadian societies, and because of a mandate from the Canadian government, abstracts got to be French and English, right? And now we're discovering some of the same appetite from some of our Chinese partners. At least people have no problem using English as a language of science, but when they're trying to find key information, they want to do so quickly, and they want to do it in their native language. So the first step, would be, having digital platforms that can handle non-Western alphabets. The first part. Second part are multiple versions of the same abstracts, which is starting to happen. Something interesting, just in general.
Now, Aaron, would that mean you'll have navigation also in different languages?
Yeah,
or-
it plays into. It's interesting. Yes, it plays into semantic tagging. Because looking in too broad a discussion on architecture and tagging, how do you? So one word, if we say ER, or maybe I'm meaning emergency department if you're in the UK, or emergency room in the US, but maybe I'm really thinking about the old smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So the context of what's being asked. So the same way you have that, say, in one language, has to now translate across different languages, which offers another level of complexity. So Jason had shared a slide that caught my fancy. Not only video is king, but then graphical abstracts, which is something that we've been doing for a bit, but what I find interesting was highlights, which I assume means, for lack of a better description, what this article is about for dummies.
PowerPoint slide of the article.
Bullet points, we learned that from New York Times.
The what?
The bullet points, like 4
Right.
bullet points.
Thank you. That's like
ask for that.
bullet points. I suspect that is going to be becoming more and more popular, particularly for alternate language abstracts.
We have that when the article is basically accepted, and then they need to provide that. It does have some editorial,
Yeah, the bullet points
because
highlights.
they can put on things which, is within it, you don't have to for a country.
It's also very popular in South American Spanish language and Portuguese publications right now.
No, so-
And that's why I first started noticing it. And I thought, this is kind of neat.
We add that after reading New York Times. See how little time we have to get people.
To Dan and Charlene, how do you react to Aaron's and Jason's presentation? What list of services appeal to you, were attractive to you that would maybe convince you to partner with them?
Excellent question.
For my organization, I think that definitely the things that appeal most are the fact that they're large, fluid, flexible organizations, especially in the technology area, and the fact that they have large resources opens up a lot of opportunities to partner and to move together. I do have to say, in both cases, I'm very impressed with the fact that they have platforms and, I guess, general publishing services that are very flexible for each specific user, which I think would really be attractive to many society publishers. But for APS, I think it's just that technology interaction and the ability to look forward and try to bring in the next new development and be on the front edge.
I agree with what Jason said. They seem very flexible and, willing to accommodate society. As far as the ACR, we still feel that our independence is compound part, because we become lost in a larger publishing realm.
Excuse me.
No, I mean, with all the changes taking place, is this sort of like the golden age of partnerships or something?
If I had a nickel for every time somebody asked me, when are we not going to print journals?
No, I didn't say
Is this
that.
the gold- no, and is this the golden age of sort of advances? I have no idea. Honestly, I'm just done answering those questions because, I'm going to be, if I answer it, A, I'm going to be wrong, and B, I'm going to be shocked by what actually happened.
I think I was just thinking about what Aaron said, I mean, how the Cambridge University Journals program is continuing to grow, and 3/4 of those journals have been self-published in the past, and now they're coming to Cambridge University Press. Are you seeing a trend where more and more of the self-published society journals are finding it is very difficult to sustain the self-published model anymore with all of the investments and the resources that are required in the new, with the new technology and the globalization?
Yeah, interestingly, I didn't put numbers to it, but the production and hosting offering that was introduced 3 or 4 years ago, between 2012 and 2014, grew by 250%. So that is that kind of thing. Small, single or small groups of journals that are published out of either a university department or by a small publisher that just can't keep up.
Yeah, well, the funny thing with APS is over the last handful of years, we've actually consolidated more and more just within the APS as we've taken on even circulation fulfillment. We've taken on our own platform hosting.
Excuse me.
And I think part of the reason there is as I try to mention in my talk, is that there's, since the society is for physicists, it's run by physicists, including the editorial office. I'm a physicist, the editor-in-chief, the IT director's a physicist. And so there's, just sort of that family mode still of consolidating into, a big family, but a family business. And the fact of trying to separate ourselves from all the other publishers, right? By staying independent, we sort of stand out a bit as more and more are consolidating into fewer and fewer sort of global publishers.
And for AACR, I know that the past 5 years we've launched 2 new journals to respond to our community. These were journals that the community came to us and asked to do more, not just publish on other journals, but to create 2 journals targeted to the areas, one in immunology and the other one is cancer discovery, which is more research and cutting-edge research.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I think we can, anything you would like to add from the panel?
Thank you. I think it was a really informative interaction.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks to the panel, too.